I remember back to the dawn of time when I was at an APSE convention, and I think it was at the Phoenix Billboard, or the Arizona Billboard, where Jim Murray, who was the second winner of this award, was the featured speaker, or one of them. So he was being introduced by some APSE luminary, if that's not an oxymoron, and started by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen," although realistically back then it was lady and gentlemen, "this man needs no introduction." So without further comment, Jim Murray. Everyone claps, stands. Murray goes to the microphone and says, "I'm so glad I didn't need an introduction because I sure as hell didn't get one." So I hope you're done with that. Bill Plaschke, what can you say? He's the top APSE sports columnist 9 times. In the top 10, 22 times. That kind of batting average gets you in the Hall of Fame. Oh, by the way, he's in the Hall of Fame too. He's in the, last year was inducted into the National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame. He's twice won the Society of Professional Journalists National Headliner Award. He was named, and this one is very important to him, Man of the Year by the LA Big Brothers and Big Sisters. He was honored the Pursuit of Justice Award from the California Women's Law Center. He's no longer the person who replaced Jim Murray. Now, I won't go so far as saying that Jim Murray will be remembered as the man who preceded Bill Plaschke, but Bill's not standing on anyone's coattails. No, never has been. Bill wasn't gifted the position as lead columnist of the LA Times. He worked hard, damn hard, that's how he got it. He's not a native Californian, but did learn how to be one, except for the native part, I was from there. He grew up in Louisville, son of Mary and Grover Plaschke. And he knew what he wanted to do from a very early age. He once wrote this about his mother, to whom he dedicated his last book. "She was my first reader, my first editor, even my first publisher. Her weary fingers tapping out my first words in a darkened basement in the middle of the night. I was a 13-year-old sports writer who couldn't type, so my mother would type my stories for me. When she finished typing, I would carefully place the pages into a large manila envelope, and we would then walk upstairs and climb into a rattling Pinto, which she would drive through deserted streets across the east end of Louisville, eventually pulling up to the storefront that housed the neighborhood newspaper. I would jump out and slide the envelope into the mail slot. 4 days later, my little story would miraculously appear on the pages of the Voice Jeffersonian." If you ever wondered where Bill got his compassion for people, his love of family, and his fervent belief that there is good in everyone, you need to look no further than how he was raised and how he was loved. Bill didn't go to some Ivy League school or one of those large state mega colleges with a big reputation. He went to Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Bill wrote once, "It was the only place that would take me, the only place I could afford. A commuter school where I was initially housed in a dank church basement next to a reeking oil refinery." He was mentored by his professor, Bill Ward, who Bill paid tribute to in 2014 when Ward died. Bill said, "Professor Ward's first lesson was that it was okay to dream, and then he taught me to write. He insisted sports was never really about sports, but about the people who played it. The best thing about sports is its humanity," he would say. "Write the humanity." Now, are you starting to see kind of a theme here on how Bill approaches things? He skipped his college graduation ceremony, drove all night to take an intern job at the St. Pete Evening Independent, showing up 2 days early. After a short stint there, he went to the Fort Lauderdale News and Afternoon newspaper. So I'll let his colleague and friend, Gene Wojciechowski, pick up the story from here, and I quote, "Bill and I worked in the West Broward County edition of the Fort Lauderdale News, in a small office in a tiny rundown strip mall. We took photos of 6-year-old soccer players and little leaguers, and then wrote about the kids. We covered some high school sports. It was the bottom rung of of the bottom rung. Bill clearly had talent and ambition. He eventually moved downtown and covered, among other things, bowling. He covered it as if it were the New York Yankees or the Olympics. I can still remember one of his leads. A gutter ball. A lousy, stinking gutter ball. Despite the gutter ball lead, a couple of Bill's bosses, Fred Turner, Bernie Lincecum, knew he was bigger than Fort Lauderdale at that time, and he went west. And there he was in Seattle, covering the Mariners for the Post-Intelligencer. From his experiences there, he wrote 2 books, Hard Knocks, with Seahawks coach Chuck Knox, which, by the way, is available used at Amazon for $1.95. He also wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy with Dick Williams, who managed the Mariners, also available at Amazon for $2.71. Now, some of you might wonder how someone from Seattle ends up down the coast in LA. Well, I was the chief recruiter and assistant for Bill Dwyer, who was the 16th winner of the Red Smith Award. And I was tasked to find a backup Angels writer. So I hired this guy, you might have heard of him from the Denver Post, named Rick Riley. He never covered the Angel game. So we still had the backup Angel writer, and I says, Rick, who do I hire? And he says, Gene Wojciechowski. So I hired Gene. Then we got a job open in San Diego to cover the Padres, and I said, Gene, who should I hire? And he says, Bill Plaschke. And so I did. Not really realizing that one day he would ascend to dominate what's probably the best job in sports journalism. By the way, as far as passing on, when I was in Chicago, I asked Bill, I need somebody, who should I hire? He said, Rick Morrison. And Morrison's done pretty well too. Bill held that position in San Diego for a few years before Dwyer, acting like a manager, signaling in with the bullpen, summoned Plaschke up Interstate 5 to cover the Dodgers. He went through the normal hazing by the desk, which, because his leads were either too clever or too nuanced for this group of sort of grumpy old men. But he won them over big. He owned the Dodger beat. Hell, he still does own the Dodger beat, except with commentary. He covered the NFL until one day in 1996, Dwyer offered him a job as a columnist. Unsaid at the time, but the elephant in the room is that he would be the person who would succeed Jim Murray whenever that day would come. Sadly, it came about 2 years later. It was then that Bill knew he would be judged like never before, constantly compared to the man Bill himself called the greatest sports writer who ever lived. And he wasn't Murray, he knew he wasn't Murray, but he was Bill Plaschke. He just had to sort of figure out what Bill Plaschke was all about. He has 4 different styles of writing, I think. He can throw the fastball, call for a popular coach or manager to be fired, or like he did this morning, scolding the Lakers for hiring J.J. Redick. He can throw the curveball, coming up with a different angle that only he could see coming. While everyone else was writing the obvious, he would find a person or story that was hiding in the shadows, hoping, praying to be discovered, and then he would let them tell their story. He could write outrage, be it for the plight of the Dodger fan with 2 kids who can't afford to take his family to the ball game, much to the indifference of the team, or a social injustice where he defends the basic principles of equality for all, regardless of race, religion, or who they choose to love. And then this guy's changing. It's a tug on a heartstring story that's guaranteed to make you both cry and care. In his portfolio from this year, he told the story of a Heisman Trophy winner, Charles White, who is living with dementia in assisted living in Orange County. And this Sunday, he's got a story on the Dodger historian who's battling brain cancer, who remembers like what room he's staying in based on old Dodger numbers. It's going to be great. He never makes the story about him. He makes the person he's writing the star. Bill's covered just about every big event you can remember: Olympics, Super Bowls, World Series, NBA championships, Stanley Cup finals, where he would cede the top column spot to our NHL Hall of Famer, Helene Elliott, so that she, so that she was the star. No ego, no ego. His search for out-of-the-way angles has no bounds. In 2008, at the Beijing Olympics, he decided to go to Beijing's famous restaurant.
You gotta tell the story.
That serves only animal penis.
Why you tell the story?
It gets better. He went there with Kevin Pang, who was working for me at the Chicago Tribune at the time. It ended up as a video, which I'll explain in a moment. Here's how he put this adventure in cosmic proportion on the video. Both of us realize these Olympics are about being fearless, crossing borders and breaking down barriers. And what greater barrier between this wonderful Beijing city and the West and the United States is that they eat penis and we don't. So now we are going to become as one. We are the world. Now I wanted a story in the video from the Chicago Tribune, which is where I was at the time, but Randy Harvey, the sports editor of the LA Times, didn't want a story and was even reluctant to do the video. The moral to this tale is there are some stories that even the LA Times does not have the balls to print. If you want to see the video, it's on YouTube. So go to Google, type Plaschke, Beijing, and penis. If you don't do it in that order, you may get something you don't. Bill has chronicled the LA sports scene as a columnist for 28 years, outlived many of the city's legends. When Kobe Bryant was killed in a helicopter crash, he wrote, "Kobe Bryant is gone. I'm screaming right now, cursing into the sky, crying into my keyboard, and I don't care who knows it. Kobe Bryant is gone, and those are the hardest words I've ever had to write for this newspaper, and I still don't believe them as I'm writing them. I'm still crying, and go ahead, let it out. Don't be embarrassed, cry with me. Weep and wail and shout into the streets. Feel it suddenly empty. Los Angeles with your pain." When Tommy Lasorda died at 93, he wrote, "He was a giant with the eyes of a child, a fighter with the softest of hearts, a Hall of Fame manager who acted like a high school cheerleader, a stalking and howling and gesturing ball of contradictions who spent nearly 7 decades following a single truth. Tommy Lasorda loved the Dodgers." And he knew how to capture euphoria, too, and excitement, like when the Dodgers won the World Series in 2000. "Dance like Mookie, soar like Belly, stream like Kirsch. The 31-year drought is over. The heavens have opened, and all over Los Angeles, it's raining blue. The Dodgers are World Series champions." Now, I could continue to read Plaschke leads from now through the next session, the session after that. You guys you've been reading him. You know how incredibly talented he is. And I know it's a cliche, but an even better person. It's all about the humanity, just like Professor Ward said. Now, before I close, there's one other aspect of Bill's career I need to mention. He's a TV and movie star. Even has his own IMDb page and a SAG-AFTRA card. And that's not from around the horn, which he's been on for 2 decades. He starred in the movie Ali with Will Smith. He was in Playmakers and Luck, both canceled after 1 season. If you check the IMDb page, he always seems to play the same character, Self. And he plays it very well. He's also one of the stars of the new Hulu series Clipped, about Donald Sterling and the LA Clippers. Some critics have called his performance the best 4 seconds on television. It's in part 1. Let me close with the words of Gene Wojciechowski because he says it better than I can. Bill didn't come from wealth or anything close to it. He started at the bottom of the bottom and worked his way up to the top of the top. He outworked people. He outwrote them. He out-interviewed them. He He went to places and talked to people that others wouldn't consider. He looked for the small stories and made them big. He has empathy and curiosity. And you know what Ted Lasso says about being curious and non-judgmental. Back to me. I've been in this business a half a century. That's a long time. But I can say without equivocation that there are a few things I'm more proud of than introducing the 2024 winner of